San Diego School of the Creative and Performing Arts. We welcome you. We welcome Professor Whatcott students. We welcome everyone from the San Diego State community and beyond for being here with us this afternoon. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's why we have these two groups that we were trying to separate, because I know that the high schoolers are going to have to leave a little bit early to catch their bus back to their high school. So we just wanted to make sure that we had that going on. The other thing I should mention before we get started is that our speaker is a hot commodity and has a train to catch. So immediately after her talk, she will evaporate and I will run out this door with her and she will gladly follow up with you by email. We've got follow-up information. But if she disappears, it is not that she is asocial, which could be true, but I don't think so.
I'm a bit of an introvert.
But it is actually because she has to catch a train. So we just want to let you know that in advance. I've been talking for a second, but let me just say greetings, everybody. I am Professor Beth Pollard. I'm a distinguished professor for teaching excellence in history, and I am the founding co-director of SDSU Center for Comic Studies. Together with comic arts curator Pam Jackson, Pam, wave, who is the co-director of our center, we'd like to thank you all for being here today. A little background on our center. SDSU Center for Comic Studies, which is hosting this event, if you didn't figure that out, got its start as an informal comics working group in 2019. Now, since 2019, so it was this 4 or 5 years and a pandemic later, we have earned $500,000 in grants from various institutions, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, the National Endowment for Humanities. And with those grants, we've established a network of scholars and librarians nationwide who are thinking about ways that comics address social justice concerns. We've developed more than 10 new comics courses here at San Diego State that populate, and you actually are the first big group to hear this, that populate our brand new Comic Studies certificate, which undergraduate students here can acquire by taking 4 of our comics courses. And on your transcript, you'll have a certificate in comic studies. This coming summer, we're planning a 25 participant summer institute for K through 12 teachers who want to learn more about teaching with comics. And that was actually so popular. We got so many applications for it. We're hoping to run that in future iterations, even without grant support. We're going to figure that out. So in other words, we're just getting started with everything that we want to do with comics here at San Diego State. Now, if you want to learn more about the Center for Comic Studies, please visit comics.sdsu.edu. That's really easy to remember. Or follow us on X, Instagram, or Facebook. Same thing, comics.sdsu.edu. Apart from promoting our events, our website has teaching materials with information and information about the amazing 120,000 and more comics collection we have here at the SDSU Library. So with that, again, thank you for being here, and I'll pass things over to Jess Whatcott for the main event.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jess Whatcott. I'm a professor in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies here at SDSU. There's plenty of seats, folks, who are standing in the back there here, and so come on in. Don't be shy. Anyway, I just want to make a quick announcement for my class that's here. Please sign in on the sign-in sheet. It's back by the door on your way out, so you can get credit for being here. But I have the honor of introducing our guest today, Tracy White, who's a cartoonist and teacher. She's here today to talk about her current book, Unaccompanied, Stories of Brave Teenagers Seeking Asylum, which tells the true stories, the true experiences of brave teens fleeing their home countries to seek asylum in the US. So this book, and some of my class got a chance to read some of the book, is based on extensive interviews that Tracy uses to help us understand why some young people would literally risk their lives to seek safety in the US. Each one of them has been backed into a corner where emigration to the US seems like their only hope. The book is an ALA Great Graphic Novel of the Year and was Civil Awards finalist for Best Teen Graphic Novel. Tracy's other work, some of which is featured up here, includes How I Made It to 18, a mostly true story, which was a Bank Street Book of the Year, and a Yelsa Great Graphic Novel, and a Texas Maverick graphic novel. For webcomics, Traced was nominated twice for an Ignax Award and was a TV series for Oxygen TV. When not making comics, she's a mom, cat wrangler, and daily dark chocolate eater who enjoys nature walks, even though she lives in the city. So please join me in welcoming Tracy White, who's going to talk a bit about Unaccompanied.
Hi, everyone. Is this on? Okay. Okay. It's nice to be here and see everyone here. So yeah, thank you, Jess. So these are some of the books that I've done. I also wanted to say, like, I never went to art school and I did not know that I would be making comics. I was a terrible student. I barely made it into college. I didn't even go to college for a long time. And then I studied history when I went to college. And then later I did interactive telecommunications. Like I was, and while I was in grad school, I started making comics online and for girls about things that we all go through, but I didn't see that there was any real context. And so that making those comics and putting them online got me to How I Made It to 18, which is that book up there, and kind of why these books that I contributed to are about making comics. And How I Made It to 18 is a mostly true story because I feel like sometimes when you tell stories, you know, if you have a story to tell and you're talking to a friend on the phone and they're like, okay, you know, I've got 2 minutes, you condense your story really fast and you pick and choose what you're going to say and highlight things and suppress things to do that. So in that book, the protagonist is Stacy Black and I'm Tracy White. And it's about, was not very happy as a teenager and was quite depressed and suicidal. And I ended up in a mental hospital. And that's what that book is about. And I wrote it because I wish that there had been something like that for myself. I felt very alone. I didn't know if anyone else felt the way that I did. And then these other books were kind of around how to tell your own stories. I think it's really important that people are able to tell their own stories if they want to, and to have those tools, and comics are a great way to do that. These books down here are more recent and they're all around social justice. I'm really interested and want to focus on immigration and unaccompanied refugee minors and asylum seekers. I feel like they get dehumanized a lot, and in the language that we use in the media, when you talk about caravans and aliens, and it's like, wait, but those are people. And so all of these books have some way of doing that and trying to uplift these stories. My latest one being Unaccompanied, and oh wait, I have to have 2 things. So Unaccompanied, as Jess was saying, is about 5 incredibly strong, courageous teenagers from 4 different countries, from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Guinea, Africa, and why they end up having to leave the families that they love, the things that they love, the countries that they love, to undertake an incredibly dangerous journey to walk alone to the United States, which is thousands of miles, and you don't know where you're going. And if you got these devices in my hand, if you kind of think about it, there's so many kids, and there's a lot of other people too, but I've really focused on children. You can think about it as like a giant funnel that starts with all these kids, and by the time they cross the border, it's like this, and you don't even know how many don't make it or where they disappear to, because it's really hard to keep track of those things. So these kids are courageous. They're, in a way, they're superheroes, and they're also really lucky to actually make it across. And once they get across, a whole nother kind of journey happens with the immigration system. And that's what this book is about. I love to communicate in words and images, which is why it's a comic. There's a lot of good reasons for using words and images to tell a story. But why did I tell this story is because in 2016 and 2017, there was a lot going on our borders, and there always is, but it had really come to the forefront. That dehumanizing language I just talked about was really bothering me, and seeing these images of these kids, the kind of deficit narrative over and over again of like dehumanizing and pity, and like I just kept thinking, like, but who are these kids, and what do they like, and what books do they read, and who are their friends, and
what are their favorite foods? And I really was like, I just couldn't stop thinking about the fact that they were people, that they were being depicted, they were being depicted in such negative ways. It really, and I wanted to do something, but I'm like, I'm a cartoonist and a teacher and a mom and like, I like cats, what, you know, I didn't know what to do. And so I kept asking people because I wanted to figure out something to do, and we can all, you know, if there's things that you feel passionate about, I'm here to say you can figure out a way to do something if you want to. And so my questions led me through friends and acquaintances to a place called the Safe Passage Project. And the Safe Passage Project is a pro bono legal services. They provide legal services for unaccompanied refugee minors. So when you come to this country, you are guaranteed a trial, but you are not guaranteed a lawyer. And if you don't have a lawyer, and this is for unaccompanied refugee minors, and probably these numbers change a little. If you don't have a lawyer, you have an 80% chance of your case being denied and getting sent back. And if you do have a lawyer, you have more than an 80% chance of your case being approved. That's a really big difference. These lawyers who work at this organization, and there are many organizations around the United States that do this, they are really amazing people. They work tirelessly to try and support them. These laws are constantly changing, especially during our former president. They were constantly changing. They were trying to stay ahead of things. So I went to the Safe Passage Project, and they took me down to the courthouse in New York City. That's where I'm from. And there was a court, I was able to go and see a trial in progress. And there was a boy who was 12, and he was sitting at a table with an interpreter. He didn't have a lawyer. And then on the other side was a lawyer for the government with this huge stack of papers. And you're watching him and you're thinking, like, this is a 12-year-old boy. And obviously he didn't come here for nefarious reasons. And obviously there was something that drove him to get here. And yet, because he didn't have a lawyer, his odds were greatly diminished that that case was ever gonna be approved. And it was heartbreaking to see and just really frustrating. And so after we saw this, I went back to the Safe Passage with the Safe Passage people and said, like, what can I do? Is there something I can do? I can make comics, and maybe there's something we can do and we could work together. And it turned out that the person who was running it loved comics. He was like, I have this great big collection. I've had it forever. Comics are amazing. And I also, as an outsider, I couldn't tell them what the comic needed to be. I just thought maybe there's something that we could do. There's some way that the comics could be useful. And they said, yeah, actually, why don't we work with you to make a comic in English and Spanish, because most of our kids are from Spanish-speaking countries, that can serve our clients, their caregivers, and potential clients, and help them understand the legal system, help them understand why when they come here they need to stay in school, help them understand who the people are who are preying on them and their hopes and dreams and getting money from them and promising them like things that are never going to happen. And to do that, I ended up interviewing the lawyers there and making this comic, which actually came out in February of 2020. But was distributed in courthouses and in sister organizations and courthouses around, and was available digitally. But as I talked to these lawyers, I started to hear the stories of these individual kids. It made me really feel like it was incredibly important that these stories be told, that people don't really know, again, that there are kids. When you say caravan or aliens, it's like, no, this person is 12 and she's from El Salvador and she likes reading books, and this happened and that happened, and she has a brother that she loves, and this is her favorite food, and still she has to leave. And when she's coming here, she doesn't speak the language and she's really scared, and these things happened to her along the way. And then she got here and immigration took over and all these things happened. And so I'm learning about this and thinking it would be really helpful for people to understand this, for people like for all of us in this room to understand this. I didn't know it, and I had been interested in this. So I started reaching out to other organizations who did similar things and interviewing the lawyers from these other organizations. But and I did not interview the children. I didn't interview the kids because it was going to jeopardize their cases. And because it might re-traumatize them. They had just come here a few months ago. They already have to tell their story over and over again to strangers. It has to be exactly the same every time they tell it, or their account could come into question. And so it was really, I didn't want to do that. And I initially actually did ask them questions through their lawyer, and several of them pulled out because it was too hard for them. And I didn't want to put them in that position. But the thing was that when you talk to the lawyers are also only interested in the terrible things that happen. And I still don't know about the books they read, the families that they left, the countries they love, the stories they listen to when they're children. What is it that makes them who they are? And so to figure that out, I had to make global partnerships. I had to reach out to people in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guinea, and Mexico, and find people who had similar or relevant lived experiences that I could also interview and talk to, and say like, and then interview them. And so what I would do is, after I interviewed people, this is an example, I would get it transcribed. And then it's a ton of information, right? These transcriptions are like 50, 60 pages because the interviews are long. But I knew that there was certain information I always wanted to know. I wanted to know about the country they were from, in this case, Guinea. I wanted to know about their trip over. I wanted to know what it was like in this case when they got to New York. And so because I'm a visual person, the way I organized that information when I looked was to color code it with highlighter pens. And then I could see like, oh, I need more information about Guinea. I need more information about the trip. I need more information about New York. And I could figure that out, and I could just see it really easily. And so once I did that, I took that information that was color coded and I put it on index cards so that I have these different moments for each of the chapters. And even though these don't look like they're color coded, they were on the other side. So I could also be like, here's my stack of pink and yellow. And it was really helpful to me. And then you see over here, this list, that list is like, here are these different moments that I think are important that I think I'm going to put in this chapter. It was going to totally change. This is a really early thing. When you're working on a book or when you're working on a paper, whatever you think in the beginning probably totally changes, as you continue doing your research and getting deeper and deeper into it. But this is kind of what that looks like. And then because I like colors, what I did is I had 4 different countries and 5 teenagers. There was a brother and sister from one of the countries. And so all the information, whenever I was working with a specific person who was this, like when I was working with one story, everything I had, and it would be color coded, and I'd have like a pink binder, and I'd have a yellow binder or a green binder for the different stories so that I could also always easily access all the information. Again, that's just how I organized it. And what you're seeing here on the right, because I know some of you may not be able to see. So on the right, that's an interview. In between these 2 pieces of paper, that's the script. On the left here, those are notes from somebody who was in El Salvador, who worked with unaccompanied refugee minors and women. And she'd been working there for 20 years. She was, and she looked over my script and would give me questions. So that like little comment thing there, that was some kind of question she was asking about the script that I had. And so that was just how I kind of organized everything, because it's a constant, there's so much information coming in, and from so many different sources, you have to figure out a way that works best for you. This worked for me, doesn't work for everybody. So the thing that really worked for me is editors and inviting more and more people into this, because I am a person from New York and this is not my story. I can't walk in someone's shoes, but I can walk next to them. And to walk next to them means to talk to a lot of people, but also to really listen to them and to be curious and help and have their information so I can create the most accurate picture possible. So one of the first things you have is an editor. And so this first thing is just the editor who worked with my publisher, who would look through it and provide comments. So that's the general editor. Then I had a general fact checker, because there are a lot of facts. I don't want to get them wrong. I mean, yes, I'm looking them up and I'm documenting them, but I don't know, I could get it wrong. This is a published book. You're all gonna read it in school or wherever it is. I don't want to get my facts wrong. Took me a long time to find that fact checker, by the way, because it had to be someone who could speak Spanish, who knew French, because in Guinea, a lot of the things were in French, and who had a familiarity with immigration and was interested in the topic. It was like a ton, it took a while to find this. This book, by the way, took 5 years to make. And that's in part because it took so long to get all the research. I had a legal fact checker. This was a lawyer from something called the Immigrant Justice Immigrant Justice. I just forgot the last word. Immigrant Justice something. And they are also like the Safe Passage Project and provide legal help. And so they were looking at everything because when you're talking about the legal system, very easy to make mistakes. Very easy. And so someone had to check all of that. Then I had cultural fact checkers. So that's what I was telling you about before when I made those partnerships with people in Guatemala, El Salvador, Guinea, and Honduras. So I interviewed people from there with the relevant lived experiences or similar lived experiences. And then I would, like you saw before, I had those transcripts. Then I would write the script. Then I would send it back to them. Do you see yourself in this? Is there anything that it seems to be missing? I asked open-ended questions. They gave me their feedback. I listened, I incorporated it in. Then I had DEI fact checker. That's because sometimes, you don't know what you don't know and you don't know what you're assuming and taking for granted. And so it's really important for someone who's thinking about those things, it's really helpful to have them look at your work too. And I ended up working with a wonderful professor who had spent 10 or 15 years in Central America, spoke Spanish and also French, and was really familiar with those things. And she would look it over, and we had some interesting discussions. And this is where it's really important as the author to be open to things and not feel like you know everything. It's definitely better to be like, I know nothing. So for the chapter about Fanta, who's the young woman from Africa, who I actually did stay in contact with, she really wanted her story told. Her case was further along, it wasn't going to be jeopardized, so she looked at all of her things in her chapter. I asked her questions, but I also was very careful about not asking too many questions. So the DEI fact checker, I think at one point said, look, I think the chapter that you have on Fanta, maybe there's a lot of violence with the men in here, and it's maybe too much, and it's like something that people are expecting. And we had a discussion. I said, but that's Fanta's story. But she also has men in her life who are supportive and kind. So they're in there, let me bring them more in there. And so that we can balance it out. And it wasn't feeling like it was too much, too one-sided. So it was important. She was really helpful with something like that. And then I had general readers. I have a teenage daughter. This book is for high schoolers and up. And I had 2 other people read it. You don't want a lot of people reading your things because they're all going to tell you a lot of different things. And you're gonna be like, oh my God, I don't know. But I definitely wanted my high school age daughter, I wanted to know what I didn't realize she didn't know or something like that. So it was really helpful. Also, she's a really good editor. I'm terrible with spelling and grammar, and she was great with it. And she she did everything before I handed it in to my regular editor because it was such a mess. So all of these people, 6. I have 6. So I would have notes from 6 different people for every page of my book and be looking at it, incorporating their things in. That's part of why it also took 5 years, because they're not on the same deadlines. So I had all that information. The thing that comics do, the wonderful thing that comics do, is it forces you to boil it all down, because you have so much information, but you've got to put it into a little panel. How do you do that? Right? You've got just 2 sentences. You don't want a whole panel full of words, and you've got the images, and together the words and images together have to give you a lot of information. So there's a lot of choices that need to be made. So I had those index cards, and from those index cards, I started making lists of things that I felt were important. And then next to it on the right were these weird little drawings, just because I'm a visual thinker, of what I thought those things that I had written in longhand might look like. here's another example of that. And I'm showing this to you for two reasons. One is the longhand. So I don't start any of my work on a computer because I don't know about all of you, but if I start writing on a computer and I'm like, once upon a, this sucks, and I delete it. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what did I just write before? Because that was amazing, but I've deleted it and now I can't find it. So I start in longhand because then I'm not going to delete anything because there's nothing to delete. And my ideas come out and I just leave them if they're not good and I go on, but I can return to them. And my writing is messy, but I can read it. And so that writing then becomes a script. Each page of the script represents a page of the comic, which I then start to scroll out at the bottom as like, what will the panels look like? And the panel sizes and shapes get dictated by the type of information that I think needs to go into them. So if it was a landscape, it might be a long horizontal panel. And if it was a person, it might be a small square. And I start to just kind of think about that. It's really loose. I'm just like doing this quickly. It's just coming to my head because I do this so much that that's just how I think. Because again, I didn't go to school for this, but I read a lot of comics growing up and I still read a lot of comics and I think about them a lot. Well, this is not, okay. So then I go to these things called very loose pencils. I say loose pencils, very loose pencils. So it's just now I'm like, now I've really thought about what is going to be on each page and how are these panels going to look. I don't spend a lot of time on this because it's totally going to change. I know it's going to change, but I actually still need to feel like, what might it look like? And like, for those of you who read comics, you know that the panel on the bottom right, that's an important panel. It's kind of like your cliffhanger panel. It makes it so people want to turn the page. And so like, what are you going to have in this panel? So I'm kind of trying to think about that, trying to think about what is so important that it needs to take up a big amount of space, or what is so important it needs to take up a small amount of space and it gains importance because it's the only thing that's small. So there are a lot of different things that you can play with when you're doing your graphic novel. So again, it's really loose. So there's the loose pencils, and I want you to pay attention to the panel on the upper left. And then it goes to these tighter pencils. So I've inked them in, they're a little easier to see, it's a little more detail, again, the upper left. And then it went to this page that is digital. I go to digital. Digital is easier for me to work in, it's faster. I can't draw by hand 200 pages. It will take me like another 10 years. It would really be a disaster. For my body too, because it takes hours and hours to draw a book. You have to really be like, I'm willing to draw for 10 hours a day for 6 days a week. So I went digital and I did this drawing, and this was part of, when you're doing a book, you have a chapter that you send out. You write and draw a chapter and you send it out to different publishers. My agent sends it out and says like, this is the book, you make kind of a package. And I have this drawing, and as you can see, this is kind of like this bobblehead girl. And she has very simple features. I don't know how many of you have read Scott McCloud, Understanding Comics? Is that a book that any of you read? A few people. So he talks a lot about comics, and one of the things he talks about is in comics, you can have something called an empty vessel. And what that is like the less detail you have in a drawing, in an image, the more the person reading it can put themselves into that image. That makes sense, right? So like if it's super, super detailed, then it's really somebody else, it's not you. It's not that you can't relate, but you're relating in a different way. So I was thinking, I want everyone to really relate to these stories, and so I'm going to make them really simple. Also, it's super fun to draw these bobbleheads, and all I need is these little. If I just do the eyebrows, like an angry eyebrows or worried eyebrows, that's all I need for the expression, right? And I love this, and I sent it out, and I sent out this chapter like this, and the feedback I got from one of the people was like, this really is not appropriate for your content. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, you know what? He's totally right. It doesn't serve the story to have it this simple, because these kids who are already not seen, they're still not being seen. It's too simple. And so what I ended up changing it, this image on the far right, that's actually one of the final drawings. And you can see it's still simple, but this is very definitely a specific person. And you can see she's so much more expressive, even though it's still simple. And what I do is I put more detail into the bed she's on so that you really are grounded in place. And that's a choice that you can make in how you do the comics, is where are you gonna make it detailed and where are you gonna make it simple. I still want people to really relate to this person, to Vilma. But I also want you to relate, like she is Vilma, but she's also not this bobblehead kid. It's a very different idea of what it looks like. So you do this thing called kill your darlings, which is a literary phrase of the things you love. Sometimes you have to just kill because they just don't work for your story, even though you think that they do when they start. So I thought this would be an interesting thing. So page evolution, setting the tone. So this drawing all the way on the left, that's kind of that bobblehead chapter that I told you about. And I want you to see, so that the characters, like, again, they're really simple, but then also this top panel is super simple. There's almost nothing in it. It's fairly violent feeling. It's really starting from a point of like pain, right? And remember when I started this, I wanted to talk about these kids and uplift these stories and place them really in community and not in pain. But I actually had fallen into placing them in that when I did this. I did a new version of it. I changed them. They're not as bobbleheady, but they're still more cartoony than real. I added a detail to the top panel because that felt like maybe I just needed a detail. The person is smaller, but I was still grounding it in this moment of pain that I don't think it needed to have. And so I ended up with this page, which grounds it in the beauty of Guatemala. And it's very detailed because I wanted to ground again. I want the reader to feel like the place is important. This is a beautiful place with a lot of history. This is where this family is from. They don't actually want to leave. And it's hard to leave. And it feels very different if you look at that panel on the right to the first panel that I started with. We have a lot of different feelings. It's subtle. I am not telling you, but you as the reader take in the information in a different way. And it changes the story, even though the text is the same. The middle panel is also interesting. I changed that. I went from 2 panels that sort of separated the family and made it feel like it wasn't a cohesive family. And I made it into 1 panel and they're all together. You feel like it's a much more loving and close family than you do in the middle. And I added this detail in the background, working with the folks that I had that I was partnering with in Guatemala. And they're like, yeah, these are typical things that we have on the back of our walls. We typically have stone houses. This is from where this young woman is from. And it just feels so different from the other panels. And it's these kinds of visual choices that you can make when telling stories with words and images. I don't have to say it to you, but I'm showing you. And so the reader is taking it all in because of the choices you make. So the font choice is also important. And so the font that I started with in that first chapter was, this is a sentence with traced. Traced is a font that's my own handwriting. I used it for my first book, which was about me. And then I was like, well, why am I using it for this book about other people? It doesn't make sense. Why should I use that font? All of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, that wasn't the right choice for this story. So then I went to something really neutral. This is a sentence with Whitney. But that actually didn't work with the drawing style. It's too thin. My drawings are kind of heavy and black. And so I needed to come up with a font that could withstand the drawings and balance them out. And I wanted it also to still feel like it was hand drawn, even though it wasn't, because the style of the comic is hand drawn. So you want it to be a cohesive visual thing. And so that's why I ended up with Lunchbox, which, just as an aside, has a terrible comma. And so I had to go through and put a different font in as the comma and as the apostrophe. And my publisher was like, never, ever do that again. That is the worst thing you can possibly do. It was a nightmare because we had to go through and individually change the commas and apostrophes and put this other font in, and she was just like, oh my gosh. So even though I love that font, you know, you gotta like love the whole font. It's really a thing. So font choices are important. So everything you do has to be to the service of the story. So we're still talking about these kids, and this is this is from two different stories. So I keep talking about detail versus simplicity, and when do you use it, and why do you use it? And so for so what I had decided early on, or what seemed to work, was that the language of detail would be in the grounding of place. Yeah, in the grounding of place, and that the people themselves might not be so detailed, but where they came from and what they were seeing would have a lot of detail, so that you could actually understand that even though I wanted you to put yourself into it, I want you to know that these are distinct places that they're experiencing. And so on the left, Fanta spent a little bit of time in New York. She was in a foster home, and she went to these places, and I took photographs of that. I had photographs of them, and I drew them. Fanta's again the one that I had dialogue with. She liked to cook a special millet meal, so that's actually the millet meal that she cooked, and I drew that, and this is how she cooked it, and I wanted to make sure that was really specific and, for me, detailed. And in this one, this young girl is walking. It wasn't so important to me that you knew the details, just that you knew she walked in the night, she walked in the day, and you could see the expression of her face clearly, but that the bus station at the bottom, you knew was a real thing. That wasn't a made-up place. She went to that bus station. She didn't know where she was going when she walked around. She walked around for hours by herself. So I didn't really put in location because I didn't know where she was, but she knew she walked through the day and through the night. She's looking for her mother and her brother. She got separated from them. And she then decided to take the bus to Tijuana because that's where they had said they would meet, and she never found them. But much later she does find them. But she's already in America when they are found. And that's a whole other story. Her brother turns 18 after he gets there, which isn't so great because the laws are different once you're an adult. So those were kind of the visual choices I was thinking about in terms of detail versus simplicity. So choosing what to show and how to show it. And so again, a similar thing, and I think it's the thing that comics are really good at, is kind of implying things when you want to. Also, I wanted to, so again, for the Fanta story, she's a religious Muslim, and she lives in Guinea, and I wanted people to see, like, well, what might she be wearing when she's outside? What is she wearing inside? How do those things change? She has a friend who isn't as religious, who is married to a really nice man. What does their house look like? Those things were really specific. Her village, that tree, is very specific. Her husband was incredibly violent to her. She was 12 and married off to a 45-year-old man. And he was incredibly violent to her. I didn't think that you needed to see the violence. That can just be implied. And that's the beauty in a way of comics, is that it lets the reader kind of have agency. Like, you can decide what happens in that black square, and you can decide how far you want to go with it. But you just know it's bad, whatever it is. So I don't have to show that to you, and that's, I think, an important thing that you can play with in comics. Okay, telling someone else's story. Watch the assumptions. So I touched upon this a little bit. You know, the thing is, like I said before, you can walk next to someone and listen to them, but you can't walk in their shoes. And one of the things that another publishing house said to me when I sent out that chapter was, this is a great book, it's an important book, we love this book, but the margin for error is too narrow. We're scared that you're gonna mess this up because you're from New York, you don't know these people, how are you gonna do this? And when I first heard that rejection, I was like, you know what, they're right. Why am I doing this? You know, even though I care so much and I've spent a lot of time, you know, can I do this? It really put me into a lot of doubt. But then I thought, you know what, screw you, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna figure out how I can do it. And the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna make those partnerships with the people in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. I'm gonna make this a better book because of your rejection. I'm gonna, so that I can stand up here today and say to all of you, look, I didn't know. And so I made partnerships with people and I worked with them and I took their feedback and we worked together to create stories that were authentic and that could really lift these kids up in a way that they needed to do. But even with all of those things, I still had to watch my assumptions, and it's also why I had all those people. So in this image, this is Vilma. She loved reading. The little designs in those little bubbles, those are from Guatemalan tapestries because she's Guatemalan, and she's reading a book. And I sent this off to the people in Guatemala. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And they read it and they said, wait a minute, it is great, except a girl from Guatemala would never be reading a book that way. She's going to be wearing a long skirt. She's from northern Guatemala and she comes from this tiny town. She's wearing a long skirt and she's going to sit with her knees and her feet to the side. And we've never seen a girl read that. And that was like, I didn't know that I was making an assumption. That's part of the problem with implicit bias. You think you're doing the right thing, but you don't know. Because I never even thought about questioning the idea of how someone reads a book, which is like, yes, of course, I read my book with my knees up and I read my book this way. It didn't occur to me that maybe in another culture, they're going to read the book and pick a cut. It's really, really important to get that. And I'm so thankful that I had these wonderful people to work with to change these things, to make them accurate, because it's so important when you're telling a story. These they say like the devil is in the details. And the thing with comics is, like if it was just a book, I'd write like, oh, and Vilma read a book, and I wouldn't have to say how she was sitting. But once you're doing the comic, you have to show how she's sitting. Does she have shoes on her feet? When, you know, like what is it, what if she does, what are those shoes? Like all these questions come into play. So you constantly have to check everything. This is another example where she went from pants to a skirt, but I want you to see on the bottom panel is the dad. And so here I was like, okay, he's in the field. I saw plenty of pictures on Google. They had hats, they had t-shirts. Let me put him in this field with the coffee leaves. And they're like, oh yeah, but in the field, you know, we need hats with wider brims. We would never have that kind of a hat. The brim is too small and we're always gonna wear long sleeves. It's just too hot. And so even though I was like, yeah, I've looked at Google and I've found all these images and so I'm drawing from something that's real, it is real, but it wasn't what would have happened there. And I wouldn't know that if I didn't have these partnerships with people. And that happened over and over again. For my chapter that's in El Salvador, the feedback there was, oh, the noses aren't right. They don't look like noses of people from El Salvador. And I was like, oh, okay. And they showed me pictures. They said, look at how our noses are with my whole family. Look at all our noses. And these noses look like other types of noses. So I changed all the noses. I mean, I wouldn't have done that before. And I don't know if anyone notices it, sorry. Notices it, but it makes a difference. And it's these subtle things that really matter. And I was so glad to have people like this family. It was like 6 or 7 people who were reading it and taking the time to do it. And it's why when you're telling another story, you can't tell it in a silo. You have to reach out. I mean, when you're doing any kind of research, you're getting all these different books and all these different opinions. But when it's something that's happening in the moment, if you can interview people and it's not, even when it's something you know, even the book that I did, How I Made It to 18, which is about my own life and based on my own diaries, I went to the mental hospital, I got the records, I interviewed friends that I had at the time, and they gave me back memories that I didn't remember. And I was like, oh, really? I did that? I didn't know that. And you did, you know, and so it's like, even when you think you know things, you don't know them as well as you think. I mean, we all kind of like, it's, you know, we all see 5 people in a room are going to say 5 different stories of events that occurs there. I feel like I've talked a lot, and so I'm gonna stop now. And this is if you want to go to my website, if you want to email me or anything, you can do that. Just scan that code, and I'm at Trace Comics on social media.
We have about 15 minutes for questions. If anyone has questions.
Hi, so, some of the, something you wrote about, might be new. And it's so. That kind of like redraw.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have not met them. They kind of just, this is like a moment in their lives they kind of want to forget. They don't want to think about it. Santa, who's a young woman from Africa, she actually is trying, she's about to go to college now, so she was 14 when she came here. She had 2 kids. She's trying to get them over here, and she wants to be a gynecologist. She wants to do stuff for women and women's health. And she doesn't really want to think that much about the other things, and the other kids, they're still yeah.
You mentioned all those, I was wondering, like, is at least part of the inspiration for that, like, anything you saw in either your own life or maybe with your own kids, like, anything about that, that sort of, like, inspired you as a connection, you were like wondering, like, oh, what are the experiences of these kids, you know, like, and maybe put any sort of connection to your own life that inspired you to act part of the process.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, for sure. When I did in 2017, my youngest child was 2 years old, and my oldest one was 12, and then I have a middle child, so he was 7 or something. And I definitely looked at my kids and I thought, you know, they were lucky that we're born here. They could be born somewhere else. They have such rich lives, and obviously these other kids that the media is showing me, they have rich lives too. There's not just this like one picture that the media is showing. The media has a narrative, right? They wanted to show about like pity, about, you know, desperation, about whatever it is that they wanted to show. But I'm like, there's more, and these people, there's people here, and who are they? And definitely having my own kids probably made me think about that more. And as someone who wasn't seen growing up for a variety of reasons, I also feel like, and I know that everybody doesn't want to be seen, but some things should be shown and seen. And so I think both of those things played into wanting to do this. Yeah.
You mentioned that you spoke mostly with the lawyers.
Yeah.
Of the children. I was wondering if there were any instances where the children did not want to share certain aspects of the story that you still felt that needed to be portrayed, perhaps.
I mean, if someone didn't want something portrayed, I would think that wouldn't be appropriate. It's why there were some kids that I was interviewing through the lawyers that they stepped back and said, I don't want to do this. And they didn't use their stories. It's tricky.
Question. Yeah, I think I really appreciate what you're saying about wanting to show people with full lives and not just their trauma or pain. At the same time, it seems that part of the reason that you wrote this book is to like help change people's minds about these perceptions of like migrants who are coming, who are portrayed very negatively. And so I wondered how did you balance that need to maybe like talk about all of the things that people were going to, but in class we call them push factors that force people to leave or to leave home. So how did you balance like wanting to show there's like all these legitimate reasons why these people needed to leave home, with also wanting to show their full lives?
Yeah, I mean, I showed the reasons. You have to show the reasons, but you also don't have to give all the detail, right? So there was a panel I didn't show you. This is part of the editing process where part of the reason Fanta left, one of the reasons she left for many reasons from Guinea, but she had been subjected to female genital mutilation. And I had an image where I showed the tools that got used. And that was in there, and then somewhere along the line, one of the many people who was looking at it, maybe the DEI, she was like, why do you have this tool here? Maybe you don't need to have it. If someone really wants to know what that tool is, they can look at it. They can look it up. And so that panel was a black panel. We don't show it. And there's another panel where there's a young girl and one of the girls, and she was trying to cut herself. And in the book, I had her doing that. And then I think someone said to me, but do you need to actually show that? Or can you show her sitting there and this knife is on the ground? Like, do you actually have to show the act? And I was like, no, I don't have to show that act. So it's a lot of small choices like that. You wanna, you know, like, how explicit do you have to be? Often you don't need to be that explicit. You can just imply it. And I mean, the wonderful thing about comics is that you can take all that information, as I was trying to show you, and like you boil it down into these digestible bits. You make something that feels so big, like immigration, refugees, unaccompanied refugee minors. That's so big, I can't deal with it. But you can take a comic and make it into this human story that someone can read. And maybe it doesn't have all the details, but if someone reads it and is interested, they're gonna say like, oh, you know, now I wanna find out more. I want to find out more about FGM. I want to find out more about this thing. And in the back of this book, I have a lot of books that people can like look further and do more research. And I hope that it's a jumping off. It's not the tell-all thing, but it sets you up to understand and to humanize, and that's how I balance it. Makes sense? Yeah.
Are you going to be at Comic-Con next year?
This year or next
This year, this year.
Not, because I just came to California to do all this. Yeah, you gonna go?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, it's so crazy, right? But it's so fun. It's really big. No, I'm not gonna be this year. Yeah.
Where can we buy the book?
You can buy the book in any, you know, like Powell's, anywhere online, Amazon, the usual suspects. Yeah. And all the profits from that book, I don't make money from this book. I don't want to make money off of these stories and these kids. That money goes back to the organizations that support them. So like, it's good to buy the books, and then the money goes to the Safe Passage Project, the Door, Catholic Charities, and School of the World in Guatemala and Honduras. Yeah.
Sorry, just another question. Did you use any pseudonyms or are these the actual names?
No, these are all fake names. Everyone is like, all the details of them have been changed. Maybe one of them, it says they have a brother, they have a sister, maybe they have a sister. You'll never know. You know, I really changed a lot of stuff because I don't want to put them in jeopardy. I don't want to do anything that, yeah.
What was the process of like you creating the pseudonym? Would you create like the names?
Wait, say it again?
What was the process of you creating like their
Oh my gosh, it was so hard. I think that Vilma had like 6 different names and I like lost track and it was so confusing. And first I just like, I looked in, of course, on Google for like popular baby names in those countries, which is like not the best way to do it, but they were placeholder names. And then as I invited more people and worked with more people from those countries, I could chat with them and say like, well, what are some common names? Here are some names I'm thinking of. What names can you give me? I had them give me names rather than me tell them names, and then I used those names. Yeah. It's a good question. It was hard. Not easy. Yeah.
Don't want to fish for spoilers, but are these all children who made it through the system to the US or some get turned back?
Well, some cases they're still in process. There's a brother and sister, I think I mentioned, and when he came, he was 17. While he was here waiting to be sent to a facility, he and his sister were together. He celebrated his 18th birthday, and the next day he was taken and put in adult detention. And he was put on the adult track, totally different, and he went back to his home country. And the thing is, they don't keep track of what happens to the people, but I know people in those communities who are here and they tell me that most of the time, those people, if they're escaping specific types of violence, they go back and they're killed. Yeah, because they didn't come here for anything other than their own safety. Yeah.
I just want to note that character went to the detention center here, Otay Mesa
Yes.
Detention Center, which is
I
20 miles
didn't make
away.
that up. He went there. Yes. And like that was, I drew a lot of barbed wire. That's a really specific thing. I want people to really see that. And I juxtaposed that with, the beaches of San Diego, which they never saw. You know, because I wanted people to understand a little bit about what that experience could be. That was really tough, because once you're in the adult center, even though he had just turned 18, you're treated really, really differently, and your odds of staying here, I think even with a lawyer, are totally different than if you are a minor. The mom was also sent back. Just the daughter, and she's still here. She's somewhere in Middle America, and just it's wending its way through. The courts are really backlogged. These cases take years. Years.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, one more, because I forgot to forget.
Sorry, coming to you, maybe one more.
Okay.
Question.
I'll ask
Yeah.
my question. Unless someone else does.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I already asked several.
Well, mine is Monday, but you know, I wanted to, you already said that you are giving your, all of the profit from the book to charity.
Yeah.
That's very logical. How do you make it?
Well, I teach. I'm a teacher at NYU. And also I come and I speak in classrooms and I do things like that. Not all of that goes right back, but everything from the book goes back. Yeah,
Thank you.
yes, but that's,
I'm sorry.
yes, yeah, no, yes, thank you for asking. That's an important question. But you don't make a lot of money when you're a cartoonist. I mean, I'll say that, like, you're not in it to make a lot of money. I do this because I love it. I don't know how else to express myself. And I think it's a beautiful way to communicate complicated and complex ideas to a variety of people, and you can do it on any subject. Thank you so much.